All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Wisniewski. In today's webinar, we're going to be showing off some of the new improvements with the Anchor Rod Custom Member, the new Anchor Rod tool, and then some of the basics of the new Cage Ladder Custom Member. We're going to start off here this morning with the Anchor Rod tool and the Anchor Rod Custom Member. I'm going to start by going into modeling. The Anchor Rod tool is going to be a tool that you can add onto your toolbar icons that can be used to quickly input in anchor rods by selecting members, materials, or anchor bolt holes. All this is really going to be a parametric that's going to run that custom Anchor Rod custom member. You can see it down here on my toolbar in the lower right. It's going to be what looks like 4 anchor rods on a column base plate. If you do not have this icon on your toolbar, you can find it in your toolbar configuration under Model Parametric. You should have Anchor Rod tool. You can go ahead and drag that anywhere onto your toolbar as needed. So I'm going to go ahead and run this here once. So I'm going to run my Anchor Rod tool. Like I said, you can select by member, material, or anchor bolt hole. I'm going to go by member here for right now. I'm going to hit OK. Select the column I wish to add my anchor rods to. From here, that's going to be our standard Anchor Rod custom member screen. There's going to be a few new enhancements to this versus what was in older versions of 7.2 here. You're going to see now we have a few more items in here in the upper right for overall length, your threaded length, projection above base plates, projection above concrete, base plate thickness, grout thickness, and embed. Some of these new fields were added in there to give you guys, the users, a little bit more control over the actual output of the anchor rod that you're going to see. Additionally, here you may also see with some of these that there is validation involved with these. Whenever you have a value here that's turned to a salmon color, it's telling you that these values must add up, and currently they are not adding up to the correct numbers. And as well down here at the bottom, the OK button's grayed out, meaning I cannot continue on with adding in this custom member. If you do run into this situation, if you hover over one of the salmon-colored fields, you'll get a little balloon warning saying what must that value add up to. Here for projection above base plates, I can see the projection above base plates plus the base plate thickness and the grout thickness must add up to the projection above the concrete. Just to go over a few over those, if I open up, I just have a little detail here. So here we have my grout thickness, my base plate thickness, and projection above base plates. Like I said, all 3 of those must add up to the projection above concrete. And then you have your projection above concrete and your embed length. Those 2 must add up to the overall length here. So if I come up to back to the model here, I can see my base plate thickness right now is a read-only field. It's 1.5 inches. That's the size of the thickness of that actual base plate on that column. So I cannot change that. I'll leave it being a projection above concrete of 6 inches and change my projection above base plate to 3.5 inches, thus validating all the fields. Just note here, if you do make additional changes here, maybe I change the overall length, you may have to re-evaluate some of these values. Now I use 25 inches instead of 24, and now maybe I'll come down here and change my embed length. To 1'7", thus validating all the fields, allowing me to hit OK down here at the bottom. And do I wish to add in another group of anchor rods? I'll hit no. And notice here it's went through and added in the anchor rod to all 4 holes or anchor holes within that base plate. Pretty simple. So we saw we can do that very quickly with just a single column or single base plate here. It is possible to go through and add in anchor rods using the Anchor Rod tool to multiple columns or multiple base plates all at the same time here. As an example, I'm just going to run a quick advanced selection. I want to select all base plates or all materials that have a mark of BP1. You can see I have 6 items selected here, and I'll just go ahead and run the Anchor Rod tool again. Set it to select by material. I'll right click and hit OK for my selection. Here I can see I still have 1.5 inch thick base plates. I'll make the same change here as before, changing my projection above base plate here to 3.5 inches and hit OK. And there I can see I have my anchor rods all to every single BP1 that was currently visible in this erection view added in there. Okay, now what's going to happen if I go through and I select a situation where I have multiple different thickness of base plates? How's it going to resolve that problem? Well, let's come in here. I'm going to do, I just deleted those anchor rods, and I'm going to run this anchor rod tool one more time here. I'll select by member. So here I have one base plate. Here's a slightly different base plate, different piece mark, but same thickness. Those are both 1.5 inches. And I have another base plate here that's going to be 1 inch thick. So I'll just select these 3 columns for the time being and right click and hit OK. Up at the very top, when you run this anchor rod tool with multiple members, it'll call out the anchor rod for your 1.5 inch thick base plates, and it'll call out each one of those piece marks. BP1 and BP6 is what I have here. Maybe I want to make the same adjustment there, 3.5 inches. We'll leave this being a straight rod type, and I'll hit OK. And then for every additional thickness of a base plate that was selected here, I'll have another window that comes up. Here I'm using for 1 inch thick base plates, and that's just the piece mark of BP2. I'll leave these values as is, and maybe I'll change this to be a hook stud here in this situation. I do not wish to add any more. And there I can see I have my hooked anchor rods over here on BP2, and then the straight anchor rods on BP1 and BP6 for the ones I selected over there. So you can definitely go through and select multiple members. Like I said, this is a great tool if you want to add in anchor rods to several members all at the same time. Now another new enhancement here to the anchor rod custom member is the plate washers here. These plate washers are no longer a bolt entity, but they are actually a physical plate, so you can download them with CNC. Another nice item is if I want to break those off and ship them loose, I can go through and I can go to break member apart. Maybe I'll select all 4 of them. Now they're all their own shipping mark here. Go through and show that here. So I have my own individual member for each one of those anchor rods. But doing so did not make my anchor rod actually graphical. As you can see here, it's not checked to graphical. So if I come in here and maybe change this to a 3/8 inch thick plate washer, it does update my material here. You can see that's now 3/8 of an inch. And if I edit my anchor rod member again, it is still not graphical. So those are some of the new enhancements there with the anchor rod custom member and how to use the anchor rod tool here. We're going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit now about the cage ladder custom member here. The cage ladder, new to 7.3, we've started distributing a cage ladder custom member here. I'm going to go to a different view here. The cage ladder can be added in space, basically not connecting to any member, or you can have it connecting to any beam that you'd like here. When you go through and you input in your custom member, this cage ladder, you're probably going to want to be in an elevation view because you'll be prompted to select the bottom work point and potentially the top work point of the cage ladder. And then as well, depending on what you have set in your cage ladder custom in the member edit screen, you may have to locate where you want your top hoop, bottom hoop, and intermediate hoops of the cage. So it's like I said, you want to be in an elevation view here. So I went through, and I already have a grid line cut down here called ladder. I'll just go ahead and open up that view from my elevation view. Now, depending on what type of ladder you're going to add, could have a bearing on what points you're going to pick. Whether you want to pick the full extent of the ladder or if you just want to pick the bottom up to the top supporting beam. For consistency, there's no problem with going through and selecting the full length of the ladder from the bottom work point all the way up to maybe the very top work point. But what's really going to boil down to is for your step throughs 1, 2, and 3 ladder types, you will have to go through and select your full length, so from the bottom all the way up above your supporting member up to the very top. For a step left, a step right, or a roof hatch, you can go ahead and just select from the bottom up to the top of your supporting steel for your connecting member. And then from there you can have the optional ability to extend beyond the top work point with the option of a number of rungs above finished floor. Alright, so we're in the view. Now I want to go through and add in the cage ladder. To add in the cage ladder, you either need to go to your prompt for member type by hitting F2, or on your model pull down under add, you have prompt for member type, and in here I have my cage ladder. Or if you'd like, we also have a toolbar icon for that, and that can be found in your toolbar configurations under model member. When I scroll down, I will have cage ladder. I'll go ahead and just pull that onto my toolbar. And now I can just run that from here. So I'm in my elevation view. I'll go ahead and select my cage ladder. Your status line will first prompt you to select a beam to connect to. If you do not select a beam here, you will not be able to generate connections for the cage ladder. And if down the road you do eventually need to have connections on there, you'll have to remodel in this cage ladder selecting a beam to connect to. Once you selected your beam, it'll prompt you to locate the bottom of ladder. And I'm going to locate the top of ladder here. I went up 3'7" above my top of steel there, my beam. In this situation here, I'm going to go through and we're going to add in a step through type number 2 here for our ladder type. As you can see, we have several ladder types: a step left, step right, a step through type 1, 2, and 3, and our roof hatch type. Depending on what type of ladder you have, you may have different options available to you here. With it set to step through type 2 right now, notice I have connect offset vertical 2. Down here set to beam or finished floor. If I go through and set this back to step left, notice those options now get removed, but down under my rung information I have a number of rungs above finished floor, which was not there when I had it set to step through type 2. Back to step through type 2. A few preliminary questions here. Do you wish to add a cage along to the ladder, yes or no? Do you wish to add a side rail, yes or no? And then on the side rails, you want a radius cut on the top end. Here you have your floor thickness at top of ladder. When you selected your connecting beam, the top of steel of that beam is going to be the start, I guess the bottom of your finished floor, and then you can specify how far up the thickness is for that finished floor thickness. Here we have some of the basic information about your rails, your side-by-side rail, the thickness, your material grades, your width at bottom of ladder, width at top of ladder. Here we have our dimension to first bend above finished floor and dimension to first bend to second bend above finished floor. Our side rail bend radius, and then inner side rail setback at top of ladder, and connect offset vertical 2. I can go to floor or beam. The floor, once again, is just taking that finished floor thickness on top of the top of steel of my supporting beam here. I'll leave this set to beam for right now. Down below you have your rung information. Do you want your rung spacing to be first rung odd or all rungs equal? First rung odd will allow the slack to be picked up at the bottom of the ladder. Minimum dimension to first rung of 3 inches, your rung spacing, and then you have your rung diameter hole size. Here we have our rung extended into side rails. So if I have a 3-inch thick side rail right now, I'm telling the system right now to extend that rung a 1/4 inch into it, leaving me an 1/8 inch on the outside of it where it does not protrude to. I'll leave all these values as such. Moving on to our ladder connection. Like I said, when I first went to input in this ladder here, I selected the top supporting beam as a connecting beam. Since I did so, these fields are active. Top and intermediate connection for information. Connection at top of support ladder. We have 4 options here: bent plate bolted, bent plate welded, shear tab with an angle, or shear tab with a plate. For this situation, I'll go with a bent plate bolted. Pin in your different connection. You'll go through and specify the different information: your bent plate thickness, the width, and the length of the outstanding leg. Dimension to hole from top of support beam. Maybe I'll change that up to 6 inches. So I'm going 6 inches down from the top of steel of my supporting beam. What type of holes and bolt diameter would I like to have within that beam. You can connect to intermediate beams if you'd like. Here, I'll go through and set it add intermediate ladder connections. I'll set that to yes. For whatever beam that your member line is going to cross here, that member is going to show up in this list here. In order to connect to one or multiple beams, intermediate beams for a connection, you actually have to come in here and select it. Make sure it's highlighted blue. If you just have this set to yes and nothing's physically selected over here, you're not going to get your connections generated. Moving on, we have our bottom connection information. Connection at bottom of supports of ladder, no connection. We can go bent side rail, clip angle, bolted, welded, welded. Maybe here in this situation we'll go bolted. Here you can see sort of a pictorial of what you're going to get, and then as well you can specify the specifics about that connection, potentially changing the angle size and the angle length, length of the leg to the ladder, and then your hole types to the floor and to the ladder. Finally, in the ladder connection tab, we have our top offset connection. This field is only going to be applicable when you have your ladder type set to either step through type 2 or step through type 3. The field will still be there when you select other ladder types, but currently this is only going to work for the step through type 2 and step through type 3 ladder types. So in here, what type of connection would I like for the offset connection at the top of the ladder? Maybe we'll go clip angle, bolted. I have the same options that were available to me for the bottom connection information. We'll stay with clip angle, bolted. And then from here you can make changes to that particular connection material by changing the angle size, the hole types, the diameter, and the bolt type that you'd like to specify here. And then finally here we have our cage selection. Up at the top, if you are, adding in a cage, you can go through and specify your bar hoop material, your angle hoop material, and your hoop's surface finish. Starting off here, we have our top cage. Do you wish to add a top cage, yes or no? And if so, what type of hoop would you like to have added? Type 1, type 3. Notice the image there on the right does get updated as you change them. We have several different types there. We'll go ahead and leave this just at we'll change this up to a type 2. Our top hoop location method, you have the ability to user input or user select. With it set to user input, it's going to place this top cage or top hoop based on the parameters that you specify within this screen. If you set it to user select, once we hit OK here, you'll be prompted to select the top of the top hoop for the location of it. One thing to note about the user select options is every time you come back and you edit this cage ladder, you'll be prompted to go through and reselect the locations of the top hoop and potentially intermediate hoops and bottom cage hoops here as well with it set to user select. We'll leave that set to user input for the time being. With it set to user input, you have a few other additional fields calling out the specifics on that user hoop, such as the thickness, the width, the radius, dimension to top of top hoop, and then dimension from center line ladder to radius work point 1 and to radius work point 2. Currently, the help button is not going to load up. That will be implemented into our next release version of SDS2. Moving on to the intermediate cage. Add intermediate cage hoops, yes or no. We'll go ahead and set that to yes. For our intermediate hoop location, you're going to have one other additional option here. We have auto, user inputs, and user select. User inputs and user select, very similar to the top cage. User input's going to basically go through and allow you to use this information for the location of them. But once I hit OK here, I'll be able to specify what exact hoop type I would like to have used for each individual intermediate hoop. User select is going to go through and do very similar to user input, thus allowing me to select what type of hoop I want to have used for each intermediate hoop, but it'll also allow me to locate exactly where I want each one of those intermediate hoops. Once again here with it set to user select, if I was to edit this ladder, it'll prompt me to reselect the locations of those again. And finally, we have an auto. With it set to auto, it's just going to go through, use the information that's specified right here on the screen for the locations of them, such as the intermediate hoop spacing and the width and thickness. With it set to auto, if you notice here, I don't have a screen or an option to specify what type of hoop it's going to use. That's because it's going to be based out of the bottom cage hoop. So with this set to auto, it's going to use whatever hoop type I have set for my bottom cage. So here, maybe I want the bottom cage to use type 2. All my intermediate cages then, with it set to auto, will use this type 2 as well. From here, I have very similar options here for the specifics on the bottom cage hoop and the intermediate hoops. And as well down at the bottom, I have dimension to bottom of bottom hoop I can specify. Or if I set this to user select, notice that option is removed, and thus going to prompt me to locate where I want that bottom hoop to be at. Finally, here we have our vertical bars. Do you wish to add vertical bars, yes or no? And then you have some of just the basic parameters regarding those vertical bars, such as the thickness, the width, dimension to first vertical bar, notice in a clockwise manner, dimension to bend above bottom hoop, dimension to bend below first intermediate hoop, and then final two, dimension to vertical bar from top of top hoop, and dimension to vertical bar from bottom of bottom hoop, quarter inch, quarter inch. From here, I'll just go ahead and hit OK. And this is a processable member because we are going to design connections to other beams. So I'll go ahead and process and create solids. From here, I can see I have my cage ladder. Let's go through and adjust my depth checkout just a little bit so we can see the full extent of it. Down here at the bottom, so I can see I have my bottom connection down here. I have my rungs. Here's my bottom hoop using the type 2. All the way up to the top here, I have my bolted welded bent plate connection going to my top hoop. Oops. And then same thing down here for my intermediate connection. And up top here, I have the top offset connection up top here as well. So now, that's going to be the basics of inputting in a cage ladder to a connecting beam. What about connecting out into space, or you're just modeling in a cage ladder model and not connecting to any beam? Over here off to the side, I do have a little concrete wall built. I'm going to go through and I want to potentially design or put in a cage ladder that's going to be modeling to this concrete wall. Same as before, I'm going to want to locate and create an elevation view here. So maybe I'll start off. We'll create a couple construction lines. We'll go 8 inches off of that. And we're going to have our ladder over here on this side. So same as before, I'm going to cut a section view right down the center line. And additionally here, I'm going to go through and create a few other additional construction lines. Six foot from there, and from here let's go up 8 foot. I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna locate where I want some of my hoops here. So I'm gonna lay out some construction lines. We'll go 4 foot up from there. So because I know I want to lay out and put in or locate where I want my intermediate hoops to be at, I'm going to locate and put in construction lines for each one of them. From here, I'm going to go through and start by going to my cage ladder add. In this situation, I'm not connecting to any beam, so I'll go ahead and just right-click and hit OK. And now it's going to prompt me to locate my bottom of the ladder, and I'm going to go up to the top of the ladder here. A couple things that are going to be slightly different here when you do not connect a supporting beam. Our ladder type currently, if you do not select a supporting member, you only have the options of step left, step right, and roof hatch type. Here we'll go with a step left. A plan rotation. Right now, it's always going to model this in with a plan rotation of 0. In this situation, I modeled this over going to the side of that concrete wall, so I probably want to input in 90 degrees. I'm going to leave this at 0 just so we can get a visual of what's going to happen if I leave that set to 0 right now. A few other values here. I'm just going to leave these as default though, with the cage, adding the cage and the rung information. If I go to the ladder connection fields, like I said, I did not connect or select a beam to connect to, therefore all these fields are grayed out. I can still specify a bottom connection if I'd like. Maybe we'll go clip angle welded. And finally, for our cage selection, I still want to go through and specify some of this information. I'm going to leave our top hoop type set to 4. And I'm going to, for the top one, I'll leave it set to user input. For my intermediate cage, I'll hit yes. And I'll set this one to user select. Therefore, it's going to prompt me to locate where each one of those intermediate hoops are going to be located at. And then for my bottom cage, we'll go through and we'll specify type 2. I'm going to leave that set to user input as well, and dimension the bottom hoop of 8 foot. From here, make sure vertical bars are being shown. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to ask me to add another intermediate hoop. I'll go ahead and select yes, and then locate where I'd want that next intermediate hoop to be located at. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to select this one here. Like I said before, with it set to user select or user input for the intermediate hoops, it'll bring up this screen prompting you to select a hoop type. We'll go 2 on these first couple, and then you can also specify the parameters regarding this one particular intermediate hoop. I'll add in another one. We'll go here. We'll leave the same parameters, hoop style number 2. Add in another one, leave it at hoop style number 2. And maybe I'll add in 2 more, but we'll change this to a hoop style 1 just to show that we can have varying results. And we'll leave that one as is as well and hit OK. Once I'm done, I'll go ahead and hit no and go ahead and process and create solids. Here, if I rotate around, I know I cut that section view, but like I said, going back to that plan rotation, I left that set to 0, so it just left the ladder rotated 0 degrees, just like you would think of a column rotated 0 versus 90. So if I want to readjust that, I'll come in here and edit it and set it back to plan rotation. So I'm going to cancel out of there and go back to my previous view. Now I'll set it back to a 90-degree rotation. And once again, it's going to prompt me to locate where my intermediate hoops are again with it set to user select. So I'll go through and respecify those real quick. And we'll process and create solids one more time here. Now here I can see, going back to the user select method, my bottom hoop and my bottom few intermediate hoops are using the style number 2 there, while my other additional intermediate hoops there I changed to a style number 1. I can see those with slightly different hoop style, and my step through left up top here. Like I said before, with it set to user select and I edited that cage ladder, I had to reselect where I wanted those intermediate hoops to be located at. So that's going to be some of the basics there of inputting in a cage ladder. One final thing I want to show regarding the cage ladder is going to be copying of the cage ladder. There's going to be one slight difference here when you go through and when you copy a cage ladder. I'm going to open up my ladder view again. And let's say I just want to copy this cage ladder over to this location over here. You're going to do this exactly the same as you'd copy any other member. I'll go ahead and select it, right-click and go to Copy Members. I'll leave everything in here as default, locate my reference point, and then locate my second point. I'll confirm the copy. But now when you copy a cage ladder, so the system knows what member to connect to, if you notice up top there in your status line is asking to locate a beam for the copy. What beam do I want to connect to for this copied cage ladder? So with that selected, I'll go ahead and right-click to close the command, and we'll process and create solids. And there we have our copied member with the connection going to my top supporting beam, and my connection down here to my intermediate member again as well. Just a note here showing that it does change. My intermediate connection is to member V14, member number 15. If I edit this cage ladder again and go to my ladder connection for my intermediate connections, here's V14, member number 15. So it did recognize that information and plug it in there. So today here we talked a little bit there about the anchor rod custom member and the anchor rod tool, and as well we've talked about a little bit about the basics of putting in a custom member cage ladder. If you have any questions regarding any of these tools, feel free to contact your support representative. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.